Good afternoon.
Hi, Andrew. Sorry about that.
That's
hi.
okay.
Oh, John.
This is John, and yeah, I just clicked on Zoom, and it said the meeting was just ended for Zoom, so I'm going to try to click on it again.
Okay, yeah, we had a technical difficulty here.
Okay.
All right.
We'll give it another try.
Wait, do you have another one? Oh, I got like a little thing that you covered.
Hello, everybody, Mr. Chairman, it looks like we actually have a quorum at this point, and it looks like everybody has just either calling in or has their camera off, which is fine. I'm going to, this is Jeff, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can run down the agenda on the screen, and also there are a couple of PowerPoint presentations.
All right, are we good to go then, Jeff?
I think that we are.
All right, let's do call to order at 1:31 p.m. Let's go ahead and do roll call. Nate Reisner, chair, is here. Nick Hall.
Here.
John Winnis.
Here.
Ann Dunno.
Here.
Rick Barrett. No Rick Barrett. Jay Crystalman. Dan Folk. No Dan Folk. Jeff Bauman.
Yes, I'm here.
Jeff's here. Andrew Icona.
I'm here.
Ed Sterling. No Ed. Jeff Milback is here. Dave Wessel.
I'm here. Thank you.
And Martin Ince.
I'm here.
Martin, and then Martin's here. And then Rose.
Here.
So it looks like we have somebody from the city, NAPTA, and ADOT. So it looks like we have quorum. Is there anybody else that I missed on the phone?
I just joined Nate. It's Dan Folk.
This
Dan,
is Ed
thank you.
Stillings with Better Highways.
Ed, thank you.
And we also have the county represented with Nick Hall.
Nick Hall's here. Okay, he just didn't answer.
Can you all hear me?
Now
Yeah.
I can.
Okay,
Yeah, I
Perfect.
can hear you.
thank you.
All right. Public comment. Is there any public comment? No. Okay, approval of minutes. Anybody make a motion to approve minutes from March 25th, 2020?
I move to approve. This is Ann.
This is
And
Jeff,
moves to
second.
approve. Can I get a second?
Oh,
Jeff,
this is
second?
Jeff. Yep, sorry.
All right. All in favor of approving the minutes from March 25th, 2020?
Aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Consent agenda. Jeff, do you want to go in the order that we have here, or do you want to skip around any?
1 second. I think I want to go the order we have.
Okay.
Let me just get back to. One second here, please. We got approval minutes. So there are no items on the consent agenda. So I would like to just go to the NAU capital and McConnell Improvement Project update, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you for putting these links in here. Whoever put them in here, these are awesome.
Yeah, Rosie did that, and it's great. Thank you, Rosie.
All right, would you, this is Andrew Iacona with NAU. Would you mind if I shared my screen for this presentation?
Yeah, Andrew, this is Jeff. Let me just say a couple of things, and then I'll stop sharing and I'll turn it over to you.
Great.
So I don't have a recommendation for this item. However, NAU and Mountain Lion have presented in the past on McConnell Improvement Project. And also a few months ago, I had asked NAU to present on what's happening, overall on NAU campus. And Andrew has put together a presentation on that. So obviously with Mountain Lion and NAU joining MetroPlan in a more robust way over the past year or so, really appreciate you taking the time to share with us all what your projects you're doing on campus. And yes, at this point, I don't see fiscal impacts. I just want to, I'll just go ahead and turn this over to you, Andrew. So let me see if I can figure out the tech and just stop sharing. And then I think you will be able to just start sharing.
Okay.
So I've stopped and.
All right. Well, thank you for allowing us to take the time to present to you a quick overview of NAU's current projects that are active in either planning, design, or construction phase. The presentation that I'll be going through will cover 12 of our more notable projects at the moment, which will detail each of the project's mission, key highlights, and their current status. Each of these project slides will be an information slide followed by an image slide. So without further ado, I'll get going. Our first project on the screen is a student athlete high performance facility project. And this project is to construct a new student athletic facility that will support several functions for NAU student athletes, including a new basketball practice gym, weight room, student academic support, Hall of Fame space. It'll also support the sports medicines programs and nutrition programs. We're anticipating that the building will be about just shy of 80,000 square feet. And it has a total project budget of $46 million. We are finishing up design and we are actually shovel ready to start this project and anticipate that occurring in the next few months. So here's an image of a rendering for the project looking in the direction of southwest. You can see the dome in the far right corner. The field that this picture is supposed to be taken from is the existing practice field, which if you were to look at this slide that I have on the screen, the existing practice field to the north, the facility is slated to be constructed where the blue area is just to the east of San Francisco Street across from the dome. So our next project is one of NAU's largest projects to date. We've been referring to it more commonly as the STEM building project, but its formal name is the Multidiscipline Academic Research STEM Building Project. It is slated to be an iconic, highly efficient smart building on our mountain campus with a mix of flexible science and engineering research spaces. And we are anticipating the total building size to be 125,000 square feet, made up of about 6 stories. It has a $100 million project budget, and there's another $30 million that will be allocated towards the backfill of other spaces that will be vacated as part of it, that might move into this project, or as a result of this project, the renovation work that would need to be taking place. One of its key highlights is the efficiency and sustainable criteria that it is targeting. We are looking at an average EUI of 80, which is very difficult to achieve, especially with a research workhorse of a building, but we have a good design team working through the initial stages of design right now. We spent all last summer and fall programming the facility, and we, as I mentioned, we're in the current phase of early design development, and that we are anticipating construction to start on this facility not this May, but the following May. It is slated to go where the existing Peterson and Babbitt academic buildings are on North Campus, just at the south end of our science corridor. Here is a rendering of what the building could look like. And you can see to the east of this building would be where the aquatic center is. Just to the west is the north-south headway. And so this is kind of an idea of what it might look like. We don't anticipate demoing Peterson or Babbitt this summer. That will happen next summer, but some infrastructure, underground utility work will likely occur this summer in preparation for next summer's demo. So as we vacate Babbitt and Peterson, we're going to need a place for those folks. And we have another project, the South Beaver School Addition Project, that will renovate the existing gymnasium of the existing Beaver School, as well as some of the existing classrooms and spaces in there. But it will be mainly in addition to this building of approximately 25,000 square feet. We anticipate that it will be capable of housing 90 new offices and somewhere between 6 to 8 new classrooms. And these are almost entirely relocated from the Babbitt building that will be demoed for the STEM building. The project budget is just shy of $10 million. The procurement method is design build. And we are in the process right now of procurement and hoping to start our design, expedite design this summer, with construction starting early fall or towards the end of summer. So on the screen, this is an aerial image of the South Beaver School, and the red hatched area that's over the existing portables or manufactured buildings will be the site of the addition, which will likely be 2 stories. And it is worth noting that the existing parking lot won't be impacted and will remain as is at this point with this addition. So the McConnell Sidewalk and Multimodal Improvements Project that most of you are aware of is a project for us to improve the multimodal circulation and safety along the McConnell corridor along on NAU's campus, just adjacent to Sinclair Wash. Right now, we are currently in a partnership with NACTA, and we have procured a small amount of FTA funding to start design. However, based on the feedback we received from this group last fall, we have proceeded cautiously to start only with a traffic study to better understand the impacts to the adjacent on and off ramps of I-40, I-17, as well as any other off-site mitigations that could be required. We've spent the last few months taking a real deep dive into this traffic study based on the concept that came out of our last year's feasibility study to better understand those impacts and possible off-site mitigations. We're excited to announce that we've gotten through some of the preliminary stages of data analysis for this traffic study, and that we are going to be submitting the traffic study to ADOT within the next couple of weeks. We're targeting a May 8th submittal, if not a few days sooner than that, as far as our design team has been working on preparing for this. And we, to our knowledge so far, is that the impacts to the off-ramps are that the condition will actually improve in this situation. So again, we're going to be excited to see what ADOT, start that back and forth process with ADOT on how to ensure that a design such as this meets the needs of the regional transportation network, and that we aren't impacting it negatively and we're only improving it. So, but it's definitely the goal here. A couple of the key improvements planned for this is the improved transit station, 10-foot wide accessible sidewalks along the north side of McConnell that don't currently exist, connection to the Foots Trail, connection to a future sidewalk that ADOT will be connecting, building this suburb. There's as you can see, a roundabout slated for Pine Knoll intersection with McConnell, and a traffic light slated for the intersection of Knowles and McConnell. We also highlighted buffered bike lanes on certain sections here, and opportunities for Sinclair Wash restoration. So this project isn't currently funded for anything further than this preliminary design phase, and therefore we know it's a little ways out because funding is definitely a challenge on the McConnell project, and we don't know where it's coming from just yet. So we're going to be looking to our agency partners to help us identify any grant opportunities we can have for it. But in the meantime, we wanted to come up with a long-term temporary solution to solve our sidewalk connectivity issue. And so this Concrete 2020 project that I just switched the presentation over to is another subset project, and that is that we are going to install a long-term temporary sidewalk where there isn't one existing that will connect to ADOT's sidewalk that's slated to be installed this coming summer. So right about this existing location where this monument sign is where we'll connect. That monument sign on the north side of McConnell will be removed entirely. We'll put in a new sidewalk that's only a 6-foot wide one, so we could avoid any impacts to Sinclair Wash at this time. That will connect to a new ADA compliant crosswalk on the east side of the Pine Knoll intersection here. And we'll revise this area as well for to continue that ADA compliant sidewalk connectivity to the SBS bus stop area further to the east. So we intend for this to be a long-term temporary solution that provides safe access while we figure out how to fund the larger project of the McConnell multimodal improvements that we are planning to get through the traffic study on first to determine the course forward after that. So another really small project is a sidewalk connection along Knowles outside of the Gabaldon residential community. There's a section of sidewalk missing where it's actually adjacent to the pedway. And this will eliminate pedestrian traffic basically walking through the landscape area or in the road. It's kind of a similar condition to what we have where there is no sidewalks, students choose to walk along the edge here instead of using the actual pedway. So we are adding a sidewalk along this Knowles Drive frontage that will eliminate that from happening and to hopefully satisfy some more of the complete street concept as well here. That work will happen this summer. It's currently being bid or finishing up design, I believe, at this moment. And it's going to go out to bid, I think, in the next week or two. So it's slated to be constructed this summer, as well as the other concrete 2020 sidewalk will be constructed this summer. Our next project is the Milton Route 66 Campus Entry Study project. And this is a project where we looked at adding an additional fourth leg at the intersection of Milton Road and Route 66 to provide vehicle, transit, bike, and pedestrian access to NAU's campus. This project is also highlighted as a partnership with NAU and also an FTA grant funded feasibility study. We utilized the on-call Mountain Line consultant, AECOM, to help us through this. We've been back and forth with our TIA with ADOT, and that we anticipate a final resubmittal this week with most of the offsite mitigations now known for this project. Once we have that feedback from ADOT on the final resubmittal, we'll be able to finalize this report. Here's an image of what the north end of this connectivity looks like with Route 66 coming into our intersection here. Here's our new gateway entry. We envisioned a connection to Knowles Drive, but realized that a through traffic connection would cause greater vehicle congestion. So it will be a limited access gate for transit vehicles and emergency vehicles. And the through connection will actually follow to the south on a Riordan Ranch Road extension through parking lots P13A and P13C of NAU's property. Our next project is the NAU Strategic Space Utilization Study project. And this is a project that had been completed later last fall, and that it took a deep dive look at how we are utilizing our current spaces on campus and ways we could better optimize that space as well. It's a preliminary phase of our campus master planning process that we're hoping to start this next fall as well. It's just another one of these studies that's going to help inform the decision making of the campus master planning process. This was a very interactive process with students, faculty, and staff to basically determine what our space needs are, what our growth is looking like, and what is working well and what isn't working well. So we are currently presenting the findings of this study to the campus community in an effort to provide more understanding on how space is managed and utilized on campus and where there's areas for improvements. So one of the outcomes of this project was looking at each of our different space types and understanding how they're being utilized best. I like this image. In the next one, I'm going to show you the best out of these findings. So each of these dots on this graph shows basically a different class, and they're color coded based on their size. Whereas if you look at the top bar, it shows that we currently have 25 classrooms that are in the range of 16 to 25. We have no classrooms in the range of 1 to 15. We have technically 86, 26 to 40, and so on. And each of these dots is an actual class in this space. So this isn't a perfect world where we have all of our classes right-sized in their classrooms, and we're utilizing our space at 100% as best as we could. But the reality of it is this is how our classes are actually lined out in here, where we have classes that are much smaller being hosted in much larger spaces and resulting in an inefficient use and utilization of the space. So if we go back to this screen, the bar at the bottom shows how we can right size our classrooms appropriately, and that we technically have a need for 39 more 16 to 25 size classrooms, but we have a surplus of everything else. We have 33 more classrooms than we actually need of the 26 to 40. So in a perfect world, through informed enrollment and scheduling softwares, we're able to fall into this more perfect scenario as opposed to this underutilized scenario. The next project is a signage project. It's our campus logo updates. So the gist of this one is that we have a lot of old NAU logos on site on campus, and we're looking to replace them with a new NAU logo. We're starting out with 3 main areas of campus wayfinding, vehicles, and monument signage. And all those are slated to occur throughout the summer. One of the main monument signs that will be impacted first is the one along McConnell. However, it's being coordinated with the McConnell project so that we aren't tearing anything out in this near future that we can anticipate. The budget's $120K is allocated towards this project, and you can see here some renderings of what the new logo would look like on these campus wayfinding and monument signs. So next we have the bus storage and maintenance facility project. This is another collaboration with Mountain Line, and that we have been funded partially by FTA grants 5307 small urban and 5339 bus and bus facilities with a 20% NAU match to start the design of a new bus storage and maintenance facility project that would be a shared facility for NAPTA and Mountain Line, or for Mountain Line and NAU. We are currently in the process of procuring the design team for this project. The qualifications for designers are due May 5th, and we are hoping to be under contract by about mid-June and starting design in July. The first task of the design team will be to assess and evaluate our potential sites for this new facility. This image shows our section of very far south campus with our 4 proposed site locations. First one being out front of my building, that's facility services, in the number 1 site of P64 parking lot. The number 2 site is on NAU's property. It's an undeveloped piece adjacent to the APS substation. And similar, site 3 is just on the east side of Lone Tree, north of the APS easement on NAU's property. And the 4th site is just south of I-40 on NAU's property, but west of Lone Tree, also on an undeveloped site. So our consultant that will be selected in the next month or so will be tasked first with helping us evaluate these 4 sites, and then they'll take us through a programming phase to better understand what this facility could look like. Some of the highlights that we are definitely looking for is a facility that is capable of supporting a transition to a zero emission fleet, whether that's fully electric or some other technology for the new bus fleets. And so that it can support the charging and power generation that might be necessary for that new fleet. And it will also, we are targeting to have a CDL test course adjacent to the facility as well. That will hopefully be something that could be a shared agency use, not just Mountain Line and NAU, but other regional agencies like the county or FUSD who might need a CDL test course. This would be a good opportunity for that as well. So we're excited about this project, and we're going to actually be applying for the next round of grant funding to try and secure additional funding to support this idea all the way through construction. And next project is our Asphalt Streets 2020 project. This is an annual allocation to provide maintenance and repairs on NAU streets campus-wide. Most of the funding this year is going to be going towards the rebuild of a section of Huffer Lane, just east of Pine Knolls Drive to the Forestry Building. And that the exciting piece about this project is it really highlights the living laboratory concept. We worked with some civil engineering capstone classes as well as advanced survey and design classes to help come up with a improvement plan for this project. There is storm drainage issues on the south of Huffer Lane that need to be addressed, as well as some ADA sidewalk issues. And they pretty much brought us through about an 80% design set that we handed over to our designer of record that is going to, that has put the plans together that are currently being bid for work on this project this summer. So we anticipate most of the budget, which is around $300,000, to go towards the rebuild of Huffer, the storm drainage improvements, sidewalk improvements in this area. And any leftover contingency funds will go towards crack fill and pothole repair throughout campus. And then our last project I have to present to you today is our Asphalt Parking 2020 project, which is essentially just like our Asphalt Streets project. It's an annual asphalt maintenance repair, and that we pick off, our deferred maintenance list of lots needing restoration and improvements. We are currently looking at ADA improvements at the P7A, which is at the HLC over here in the northeast corner of campus. And then we have some asphalt improvements at P16A and P13. We also are going to be performing some groundwater investigation throughout P13 because this thing has continued to fail year after year after we continue to pour money into its repairs. And the water is just coming out of the ground in all areas of this lot. And it's a large lot. So we're pretty confident that it's not the result of any underground broken pipe, but it is groundwater. So we'll be working through some of the investigation measures on that to better understand why that's happening and what the right path is for improvement on that. The only other asphalt improvements we see for parking lots are going to be in P64, just north of Building 77, facility service on South Campus. Just some small maintenance of the lot to keep that thing holding on a little bit longer. And here you could also see over on the left side of the screen where we're going to be rebuilding Huffer Lane. So that is more than some of the more notable projects that are in the planning, design, and construction phase at NAU. There are quite a few others that are being discussed and evaluated, but this is more of the ones that would apply to this group. So with that, I'd like to thank you again for my time and ask if there's any questions. All right. I appreciate it.
Andrew, this is Ann. I want to just really thank you for the recap, especially highlighting some of the partnership projects we have with NAU. I also want to just take this brief moment to thank Dave Wessel for his ongoing participation with helping our team with the McConnell project with the background of the traffic modeling that we've started on. So, really appreciate MetroPlan's participation in that, as well as many projects that they always continually help partner agencies on. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Yes, thank you very much, Ann.
Mr. Chairman, this is Jeff Milebeck. I'd like to just ask a couple questions, make a couple comments. First of all, Andrew, thank you for the presentation. I see that Dan Acoli and Stephen Vidral are also here. The partnership, and thank you all for being here. The partnership projects you have going with Mountain Lion are really impressive, and they've expanded significantly in recent years. And I have a general question, which is, and you don't have to answer it now, it's really more of an open invitation, is as you see ways that MetroPlan might be able to partner with you, to please, keep us in mind. And then more specifically, the project Milton and Route 66 for the new campus entrance. I'm wondering what the coordination has been with ADOT on their Milton route, on their Milton CMP, specifically related to, well, not only traffic flow, but the backage road concept that we have been looking at in that corridor.
Thank you, Jeff. In regards to coordination, we have been following the TGP 240 traffic impact analysis approach, and that has been majority of our conversations and coordination. It's been a discussion that we've constantly had with our consultant as far as coordinating what a future setback might need to be to accommodate an additional lane, northbound lane along Milton Road, as well as we've included infrastructure in that concept for a bus rapid transit stop at the site as well, to accommodate that additional lane, northbound lane there with the proper setbacks. Other than that, though, there hasn't been as much coordination as we would have maybe necessarily been anticipated with the future CMP, since I know that it's not necessarily a phase that has any deliverables like a typical section that we could have utilized to understand what the future width and back of curb would be for this site. But we are focusing on the multimodal concept of how do we get not just vehicles in and out of this intersection, but pedestrians and bicyclists to make it safe and accessible. Another piece of that project that was looked at in coordination with the Martin with Metro Plan is the cycle track connectivity, and that we have included on that backage road the kind of master plan idea of what the foot trail through this area might be. So we have that considered as well and included in our current sections for that concept, that we have that 10-foot wide cycle track in there, in addition to 5-foot bike lanes and sidewalk on both sides of the road for a complete street. We've just been trying to do our best to follow what we do know today as true, and it's been a little bit challenging to tell what the future looks like of Milton. I think we're a little ahead of it, but this study is going to help inform that campus master plan process to understand what we may or may not do with that piece of property.
Thank you, Andrew.
All right, any further questions for Andrew? If not, we're gonna move forward.
Yeah, I've had my hand up. I don't know if anyone's monitoring the chat. Thank you, Chair. Boy, I wish I'd have had an opportunity to ask questions project by project. That was a lot. Thank you, Andrew. But
Sorry about that.
backing up to South Beaver School, do you guys, and I'm betting the answer is yes, but do you consider that being a campus improvement, or are you going to be going through city development review?
So that is anticipated to be a campus improvement. We weren't anticipating going through development review. However, anything impacting the right-of-way, we were going to be going through community development for.
Do you anticipate any impacts to the right-of-way?
Not sure. We aren't expecting any impacts to the right-of-way at this moment, but if we do, we would go through that process.
Okay. And going to the Route 66 Milton project, what you showed, is that funded, and is there a construction schedule, or was that just a plan that you have at this point? Well, the maturation of the effort that you and NAPTA have done. Excuse me.
That is just a study at this time with a concept to help. It was an effort to help us better understand what it would take to add a fourth leg to that intersection and to create a new campus entry gateway there, so that we have that information to help inform what the future of project planning in that area would entail. So at this time, it is solely just a study that indicates what we can and can't do for that intersection that will inform our future planning efforts and specifically our master planning efforts. However, if there is any traction that's gained, I wouldn't be surprised if we have any grant opportunities specific to that project that we would go after them.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I think that's all I have, Mr. Chair, but I appreciate the opportunity to discuss.
No problem. I can't see any hands raised, so you're just gonna have to interrupt. Any other comments or questions for Andrew? All right, thank you very much, Andrew. We're gonna move on to general business, item B. TIP 2021-2025 draft review for public comment, pages 12 through 58. Dave, would you lead us through that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Basically, we're not really looking for a formal action at this time. Just if you find the draft to be acceptable, we're going to go ahead and proceed with the public comment, ad for a public comment period, the schedule of which was approved earlier this year. At our last meeting, we walked through the tables and have received comment. I believe I've captured all of those comments in the document. We have now included maps and updated the text. The document's in there for your review, and as opposed to walking this through page by page, we'll open it up for questions here shortly. So at our meeting next month, we'll be looking, that will be just immediately following the public comment period, which will be 30 days. And we'll run an ad in the paper, and I believe we'll also do what's called a banner ad on the Daily Sun website. We'll also have it posted on our website, and we'll look to have a recommendation for adoption by the TAC next month and adoption by the executive board in June. And we will walk through some of the highlights with the executive board, I believe, next month. So at this point, I think I'll just turn it over back to you, Chair, to see if there are any questions or comments or corrections that we need to make before we put this out for public comment.
So I will make one comment on the ADOT portion of it. Currently, our 5-year plan is up in the air. So there may be some major or minor changes that happen to the ADOT 5-year plan.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, this is John down in Phoenix. Just to add to what you said there, I think the State Transportation Board also, their website indicates that they're going to need additional time to revise the program to meet fiscal constraints. So I don't really have a new update for that, but it looks like there's going to be some rebalancing due to the projected budget shortfall. So,
Mr. Chair, if I may, if I can ask,
yeah,
if you could get back to us on that, John. Our schedule is really driven in large part by the ADOT schedule to put together the statewide transportation improvement program. And I would think it's fair to apply the uncertainty that ADOT is experiencing to the rest of our partners. So if there's going to be an extension of that deadline, and I'll maybe, if Ed Stillings has a comment on that as well, please let us know and we'll adjust our schedule accordingly, and perhaps defer or extend or repeat our public comment period if we're going to see significant changes. So I'm not quite sure what I'm looking for there other than a heads up.
Sure. And just based on what I saw today, just on the State Transportation Board website, it's kind of a generic statement saying that the board needs additional time to revise the program to meet fiscal constraints. There wasn't really any kind of a timeline on it, but I can keep asking the questions here, on the ADOT side of it. Christine Ward is the CFO, and I think she's tasked with having to rebalance that projected shortfall for the next 2 years. That's just all I have as of today, but I can certainly keep checking and asking the question. I just don't have anything definitive on it, but thought it was worthy of note, just since it's a hot topic.
Okay. Thank you, John. This is Dave, and I'll just for the
Sure.
benefit of the group, the 2024, the fiscal year 20 to fiscal year 2024 tip is still in effect, and can be amended going forward if there's a need for more immediate action by any of our members.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, John. Is there any other comments or questions on Dave's staff report for the tip?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is Rick. I'd have a question of John, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. John, do you anticipate any, and I know you just looked at the website and I could probably do the same, but do you have any read on whether like highway safety improvement program funds might be taking a hit?
Rick, I haven't heard anything about the HSIP. It's a good question. I think the question came up recently about HERF exchange being affected, and the answer from Patrick Stone was he didn't know yet. He didn't have any kind of indication one way or the other. So those are all relevant questions, but there hasn't been any rumblings about that or anything official to share yet. So I'm just making notes of these questions, and certainly will share what I'm able to. But right now, I haven't heard anything about HSIP being affected either way.
Thank you, John. I understand that answer. I just kind of wanted to open up the discussion. Of course, the city's in the same boat. We have a recession plan that was just put into place. Council approved last night. We're going into a 2-day budget retreat this Thursday, Friday. Yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty in all agencies, and we are fully expecting a reduction in revenue, especially that revenue that's related to sales tax.
Right.
So yeah, all this planning, I don't know. I'm having a hard time keeping up with all of it right now.
Yeah, this is Ed from Federal Highways.
Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, I was just going to weigh in that, on top of everything else, the highway bill expires September 30th. And so even the funding levels for FY21, I think most people generally assume they'll get a little more, but I suspect, I would say the most likely case will be a continuing resolution for a full year at the current funding levels would be my guess.
Thank you. Anybody else have any comments or questions on Dave's tip?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, Dave, it looks like you're asking for a recommendation for the TAC to approve the release of the draft tip for public comment. Are you still requesting that based on the conversations we just had?
Yes, I think I am. This is, we don't know what we don't know. And so I think moving ahead on the prescribed schedule is appropriate. We can run the ad, and if we need to, we can manage the public message if things change.
Okay.
So I would recommend that we stay the course and then manage it if things change. And I'll maybe defer to Jeff Milebeck if he finds that acceptable.
Yeah, thanks, Dave, Nate. I think that's a great idea. We don't know what's going to happen. Later on in this agenda, we're going to talk about federal funding update, and we can make our respective guesses and share our respective information. But for now, we need to keep moving, I think. And I would appreciate approval of this by the TAC.
Sounds good. Does anybody want to make a motion to approve release of draft transportation improvement program for public comment? If somebody's trying to make a motion, you're muted.
I'll go ahead.
This is Nick. Or go ahead.
I'll make the motion, Dan Folk, to release the draft tip for public comment.
This is Nick. I second.
All in favor of releasing the draft tip for public comment?
Aye.
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 Any against? Sounds like an approval to me.
Thank you.
Yep. Let's move to the next item, coordinated public transit human services transportation plan. Martin, you want to bring us through that?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this item is looking for a recommendation from the TAC for review and approval of the coordinated plan. Coordinated plan is, of course, shorthand for the Coordinated Public Transit Human Services Transportation Plan, which is a federal requirement of all regional agencies. And in our region, it's a joint production of both Metro Plan and Mountain Line. The main purpose of the plan is to improve mobility for certain populations in the region, including people with disabilities, older adults, and low-income populations. We are required to make updates, kind of generic updates to the plan every year. And every 4 years, we're required to do more of a major overhaul to the plan. We happened to do that major overhaul last year, so this year represents just one of the annual updates. Typically, that would just include updating the annual information in the plan. This year, we actually have reviewed some of the information in it in terms of the, we reviewed and discussed some of the gaps in transportation services and talked about some of the strategies and actions that are needed to address those gaps. And that review and that discussion is typically held at the region's Coordinated Mobility Council. Again, that's a group of citizens and other professionals interested in this topic that is convened by Mountain Line and Metro Plan for quarterly meetings. As I mentioned, this is a joint production of both agencies. It has already been through Mountain Line. Their TAC did not meet in April, but the TAC for Mountain Line was provided a copy of the document and provided no comments on it. It was approved by the Mountain Line Executive Board at their April meeting. Assuming that we get through with a positive recommendation today, it will go on to the Metro Plan Executive Board for final approval. I think that's all I have in the way of presentation. Again, we're looking for a recommendation of approval to move it on, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Does anybody have, thank you, Martin. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Martin? Going once, going twice. All right, would anybody like to make a recommendation for adoption of the 2020 Metro Plan Mountain Line Coordination Public Transit Human Services Transportation Plan?
This is Ann. I move to approve.
Thank you, Ann. Can I get a second?
This is Andrew. I'll second that.
Thank you, Andrew. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Sounds like a recommendation is passed for the Human Services Transportation Plan. Thank you very much. So we'll go to the next item on the list. D, Metro Plan Project Criteria Process Update. Dave, would you walk us through that one?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an ongoing process. It really started back with the advance, where during that discussion, several potential priority projects were floated, and the decision was made just to really explore the universe of projects out there and put them through a systematic process. And I want to thank everybody for participation in the manufacture of that process, and more so for your participation in presenting projects for consideration. The outcome of the process is going to be really our multi-year program. We have the Unified Planning Work Program that we adopt. It's now in a 2-year cycle. And because we've been in this kind of growth and formation stage, we're looking to make a fairly major amendment to reflect the outcomes of this process for the second year of our work program. But hopefully it will result in informing the process for years to come, potentially. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Actually, Dave.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yes. Thank you,
A
Rich.
few introductory slides on this.
Right. Thank you.
I think my screen is up if everybody can see it. And, you know, as Dave said, he has done a lot of work on this with all of you. And I just wanted to provide a little bit of an overview, background, and context, which is basically answering the question, why are we doing this anyway? And as a reminder, it's all about what are the best ways for Metro Plan to add value. You know, why do we exist as an organization? What can we do to help? And I want to go back to the strategic work plan that this TAC adopted and we created just in January of this year. And there are some statements in our 5-year horizon. And this is the first time we've had really a 5-year horizon. And reading these things through, this idea of creating a climate of synergy and collaboration, maximize resources, I highlighted the words planning efforts and multi-jurisdictional because I wanted to be clear on some of the things that are Metro Plan priorities as we look at projects. And some of them our community partners maybe cannot complete on their own. Another aspect of the 5-year horizon is to convene local, state, federal policy discussions to influence transportation funding, and then to facilitate communication and planning between member agencies, and this whole idea of shared priorities, aligned goals, advanced projects with one consolidated voice. So I know there's a lot of words there, and they might not actually pop as sound bites or make a very good jingle, but they do give us some direction. And also one of the measurable objectives in the strategic work plan for us to get done within this period is to clarify Metro Plan's role, how it will support member agencies, inventory regional priorities, which Dave has done, evaluate projects through a relevant prioritization matrix, which we've started and we'll do with you today, and ultimately choose 3 top projects for Metro Plan and the role that we will play in each. Now, since this
could I interrupt you? What we're all seeing here is the staff report, and I think you're expecting us to have something other than that?
Yep. Thank you for telling me that. I thought you had the presentation.
There it is. Thank you. Sorry for the interruption. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I appreciate
Yeah.
the interruption. I could have gone through the whole thing thinking you were seeing it. So I'm not going to start it over. I will say, you know, I highlighted the 5-year horizon that's in our work plan. Like I said, this is not exactly a commercial jingle, but it does capture the essence of what we're trying to do as an organization. And then we've got a measurable objective in our strategic work plan. And here's the idea of, you know, our role, how we support member agencies, going to inventory regional priorities, evaluate those projects through a relevant matrix, and then choose the top three projects for Metro Plan and how Metro Plan will be involved. So in terms of progress and timeline, it was in February that Dave presented this draft tool and the TAC supported the approach. In March, the tool is refined, and over time, Dave has interviewed member agencies for their priorities. Dave and I have had some discussions and running priorities through a matrix to try to choose the top projects. Today, we're looking for review and input, and in May, next month, we'd be looking for the TAC to adopt priorities. And I wanted to take a minute to frame this a little bit in terms of types of projects and priorities, to put in some context what Metro Plan does and how we align with member agencies. So clearly there are individual agency priorities. The city, for example, has the Lone Tree Corridor. Mountain Line has the bus rapid transit. ADOT with I-40 bridges. NAU projects that Andrew just shared. The county with Lake Mary Road bridges. And clearly, these are of benefit to all member agencies at some level, but also clearly, there's an identified leader and a commitment from a member agency to see these particular projects through. And then there are projects that fall into the regional and shared priorities. And I would put the Milton 180 CMP in that category. ADOT is obviously leading the project. The 4th Street Bridge widening, which is really the city and ADOT heavily collaborating. And then the BNSF corridor, which I'm not sure how to frame where all of the leadership is coming from on that project. It's a big thing that affects everybody. We do, however, then have Metro Plan priorities. And I put criteria here, and this goes back to the highlighted yellow items that I shared from our 5-year horizon. So what Metro Plan will be looking for, based on the direction we have, are projects that have a multi-agency benefit. So if it just benefits one member, it won't score as highly as something that benefits all members. Where there's a staff need. So if an agency is already doing it and has leadership and staff, less need for Metro Plan. If there's a staff gap, makes sense for Metro Plan to get involved perhaps. If there's a funding opportunity, the opportunity to get out there and try to bring additional financial resources to this region. And then finally, as a planning organization, a long-term horizon. We're really not, Metro Plan is really not involved in design and engineering and construction, and long-term horizon really fits for us. So a great example of that is a regional transportation plan. Benefits everybody. It clearly is something for Metro Plan to do. We have access to funding to do it, and it's a 20-year horizon. So I just wanted to frame that, and I'm going to go a little bit deeper here. The measurable objective we've got is to come up with 3 major planning projects, and they generally have a multi-year commitment. I've already filled the top one for the regional transportation plan because that's due. And then to be determined on priority 2 and 3. And I put overlap likely because as Dave and I were talking about this, doing 3 major planning projects seemed to be distinct from pursuing funding. So there might be a project that another organization is doing, but Metro Plan could be involved with either leading or just partnering or that single regional voice to try to bring more money in. So the Lone Tree TI is a possibility. The CARES Act which I think a month ago, certainly 2 months ago, didn't even exist. The build grant, Dave has put a lot of hours into the build grant the past couple of years and is submitting it again, working really closely with the city, and that's for the 4th Street widening. And then Build America Bureau, which is a low interest loan, again, primarily a city project and looking at the Lone Tree Railroad overpass. So possibility here of identifying 3 major funding initiatives in addition to the 3 major planning projects. And I am almost done here, but I do want to provide some, I guess, a background on some of the other things that are going on with MetroPlan. It's also in our work plan to come up with $50,000 per year for small project support. For example, a pedestrian crosswalk. This was something that was one of the members, at least on the TAC, was really passionate about, and it got included in our work plan. We're also doing letters of support for things like Mountain Lions Free Fair Study. Pretty simple, and we can do a lot of things like that to support other agencies. And then there's participation in planning efforts of other agencies. So Lone Tree Corridor, Milton CMP, and Mountain Lions BRT. And Dave has been really involved in those, and I've been, somewhat involved as well. And then ongoing data collection and management. So streetlight funding and transportation, transit route transportation model. There's a contract currently going. And then the overall transportation model. It needs maintenance and consistent update as things change, but there's also a major update every 3 years. So this is my last slide, and I'm going to turn it over to Dave. Today's goal, hopefully, is to get closer to identifying 3 major planning projects, 2 more actually. And there's a matrix that we've started to run things through, and Dave is going to take you through that, that logic. So before I turn it over to Dave, Mr. Chairman, I can't see anybody. So I'd just like to ask if anyone has questions for me before I turn this over.
Hey,
Mr.
Jeff,
Chair,
this is Dan. Can you go back? Did you have a screen about funding?
Here's one.
All right.
Is this what you're thinking about?
It is. So has MetroPlan identified new funding sources? I guess that's what I'm asking.
No, I put question marks by all of them. I think what I'm looking for is to get clear on what major funding sources we would be pursuing. So, we're exploring the possibility of funding for Lone Tree TI, and then CARES Act. I mean, there's a new CARES Act that we'll talk about soon, CARES Act 2, which should have a lot of transportation funding. There's the build grants, there's the Build America Bureau grants, there might be others. What I want to get to is where does it make sense for MetroPlan to focus its energies to support bringing additional funding to this area?
I guess that's my question. I thought that was something we talked about at the advance, was finding additional funding sources. So I guess my question is, has MetroPlan identified new funding sources? I guess these are the ones.
So Dan, Mr. Chair, if I may, this is Dave.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so Dan, sometimes you need a project first, and then you identify the funds that it might be eligible for. Sometimes you find funds that are available and you try to find a project that matches. I think when we start walking through these priorities and look at a program, a draft program, you can see some of that at play. There is no new predictable revenue. It's almost all competitive at this time. And so part of that will be funding pursuit as opposed to funding strategies. And I think when we talk about maybe the legislative effort, we may talk about longer term strategies for addressing, state highway gas tax, federal gas tax, and trying to increase those more predictable revenue streams.
Thank you.
Any other questions for me?
Mr. Chair, this is Nick Hall. I have a question.
Go ahead, Nick.
Jeff, on one of your slides, I believe it might have been 2 before this one, you had the individual priorities. Yep, on this one.
Yes.
Where did the information come from for Lake Mary road bridges?
That's from my memory of some documentation that was sent forward looking for state funding. Did I get it wrong, Nick?
As far as I know, all of them are in good condition. We had one that was not so much, but it was recently improved with the flat project. So most of those are in pretty good shape. So I do not think that's one of our priorities right at the moment.
All right, well, I will update this slide before we present it. And thank you.
Thank you.
Also, Jeff, the top priorities aren't I-40 bridges. I believe our top priority is pavement preservation and bridge preservation.
Okay. Any other feedback? All right, well then I'm going to stop sharing and let you take the screen, Dave.
All right, thank you, Jeff. So I'm going to kind of begin with the end in mind. This is where we're going to end up today with the discussion of a potential program. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
And so this is looking at, you can see the RTP, the Regional Transportation Plan here, West Route 66. And then here's the funding pursuit Jeff referred to, and then some other support activities in which we might engage. So that's the end in mind. What is going on with my screen? So that's there. That's there. There we go. So again, to look at the overall process a little bit, we ranked things by, asked people to weigh in on regional importance. We reorganized this section to be action need, because it's really distinct from the regional importance, and then metro plan involvement. Again, thank you everybody for participating. And what was done, this spreadsheet was sent to everyone. This is a first tab is just a compilation of all the projects. Then here they're sorted by agency. You can see the ADOT and City Flagstaff Engineering, Planning and Development, MPD, Mountain Line, and NAU. We have ADOT's priorities over here, just as a point of reference. And then, appreciate that a lot of people weighed in on not just their own agency's priorities, but priorities across the region. And so consequently, we had a number of duplicates. And that's what this next tab did, was sort things by name and looked at trying to identify duplicates. So there's places where I introduced some language to help with the sorting. So advanced traffic management systems where we had smart systems, you know, TSP, ATMS, just to get them to sort right. And then an effort to clean those up in terms of eliminating some of those duplicates. And in those cases, I tried to take an average of score that we saw there. And then these next few slides are just, I guess I haven't, sorry, there's a couple that I did not use. Sorted them by the overall importance, so you can have that perspective. And you can see here, you know, the top project from overall importance, Lone Tree Overpass, the RTP, Stardust Trail. It's kind of an interesting one. Active Transportation Master Plan, the Lone Tree Corridor more broadly written. The Milton Downtown Mile, sometimes the BNSF Mile. But you can see where these were ranked by importance. Then we looked at the need level. J.W. Powell, McConnell, 180 Humphreys. You can see those there, and then by involvement for Metro Plan, ped bike transportation modeling, some of these more routine things that were pretty predictable, data planning, regional transportation plan. As Jeff and I looked at this, we found really this last or next to last tab to be perhaps the most telling, where I just summed up all three categories and ranked things that way. And it seems to really paint a more clear picture. And I think it was supportive of the process that the RTP in this perspective came to the top. That should be, you know, it's our mandated effort, and having that rise to the top makes some sense. So I'm just gonna, you know, kind of pause there for a little bit as you guys digest this. And, you know, kind of put it out there. I don't know how much time you guys had to review this, but maybe this is a good time to pause and say, as you look at this, are there questions about some of the scores? I can scroll through the project list if you want to. There's about 85 projects all told. But is there anything that strikes you as out of the ordinary here, or that doesn't make sense? So I'm going to pause and see if there's any questions at this point.
Dave, this is Nate. On tab all ex-agency, where you have ADOT priorities, those are not ADOT priorities. Those are projects that we gave FMPO that were in the FMPO area, but not the ADOT priorities.
Thank you, Nate. So that's a great clarification. As Nate mentioned earlier, relative to a slide of Jeff's, system preservation is the highest priority in the area, or for ADOT, then modernization, then expansion. And their priorities go through the P2P process, the planning to programming process, which we'll discuss here briefly or shortly. And then they provided ranks within the region. So these are ranks within the region, and there's a big caveat that system preservation projects, which are largely not listed in here, would be their higher priorities than all of these. Is that a fair way to state that?
Yeah, and then these are just district, what we gave you is district ranking, not ADOT ranking, but district ranking of projects within the FMPO region that the FMPO could choose to either try to move forward with or not. But from an ADOT statewide priority level, there's only, I think, 2 projects within the region that even rank in our top 100 projects.
Thank you for that clarification. So we were looking at this slide. Any other questions or comments about things that may need to be rescored or reconsidered or clarification?
Chair, this is Rick Barrett. I have a question.
Go ahead, Rick.
Thank you. Dave, I was just looking at row 8, which is John Wesley Powell 4th Street.
Yeah.
And wondering if you could explain the 5 score for regional importance. I mean, my understanding is that this route would not provide a shorter or quicker route than routes that currently exist. And therefore its proportionality of background traffic is 10 to 15%. And that the other 85 to 90% is solely attributable to development.
So, yeah, let me explain that, and maybe there's some adjustments to be made here. So from a regional impact, the criteria was, is it a road of regional significance? And it certainly meets that as an arterial. It will be a multimodal facility providing ped, bike, transit in the long term. So it meets that. I think the point that you're getting at really hits the urgency. Is there much urgency associated with this project? And I think depending on who you're talking to at the time, there is or there isn't. And so it ranked with a 3. As far as the magnitude, again, I think that might be a question as well, based on your comment there, that from a magnitude perspective, at least in the short term, it's not going to be that impactful. And even perhaps in the long term, it's going to be primarily as you said, kind of a collector for that area, and not and offer some redundancy, but not necessarily provide a lot of system-wide benefit. So I think it's really in the urgency and the magnitude where your concerns would lie. Does that answer your question, Rick?
Yeah, it answers my question. I think a lot of those points I already understood. I'm just continuing to trying to understand the significance of this project to Metro Plan. So I continue over on that row and I see Metro Plan's involvement in that project. Just trying to understand it.
Yeah, so
is there a tab here that tells us how other agencies looked at the same questions that was asked of myself when we talked? I assume
if you looked at Rick, if in the early tab, all by agency, and I think if you looked also by name here, you can see if multiple agencies weighed in on any given project. So if we got down to John Wesley Powell, So there's Coconino's weighed in. We see am I in the all clean? So we see the airport piece. That's really an input from the county on that particular project.
Yeah, thanks for helping me understand that.
Sure.
You can go back to that first sheet. And Mr. Chair, I think I'll reserve any other comments at this time. Thank you.
Yep. Anybody else have any questions or comments for Dave?
Mr. Chair, this is Ann with Mountain Line. I'm going back to, hi, I'm going back to Jeff's slide, or just, you don't have to go back to it, but his, my understanding of this discussion was from this group was requesting some feedback on the second and third potential priorities for Metro Plan in the near term. So the first one, of course, is the Regional Transportation Plan, which lo and behold on this list shows up as the first one, which makes sense. And so going back to that, looking at the function of Metro Plan as being an umbrella partner agency, I mean, it's still, it makes sense that, you know, a couple of the highest priority projects are the Milton Mile downtown, which I assume includes the railroad bridge at BNSF. I don't know, but I would imagine that's part of the puzzle. But then the overall bike and ped projects, which has definitely been discussed in our community as priorities in the community. So as I'm seeing this list, the top two right under Regional Transportation Plan generally are, I mean, it makes sense that those two have fallen out to be the highest ranked and would be worth discussion as talking about how do you then I mean, how would you then potentially fund those types of projects? So going back to Dan's discussion about, are we talking about funding sources or projects? And it seems like we should be talking about identifying the second and third project, whatever that is, and then within that project, what are funding strategies? So I guess going back to Dave's overall ranking, I think everything that he's showing here is sort of makes sense with how the highest ranked items are falling out. So,
Mr. Chair, if I could.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So Ann, thank you for that. And I do kind of want to skip here soon to that opening, the slide that I opened up with, or the image that I opened up with, and that's the 3-year program. Talk about how to address these. I think for most of us, we're very familiar with many of these projects. I would invite, I think I saw that Scott Overton is with us, and would like him to speak to the transportation systems maintenance and operation a little bit, and then maybe Jeff Bauman could weigh in a little bit there too, in terms of some of the things that they're looking for, and maybe to set that up a little bit, because it will be part of the conversation about a draft 3-year program.
Hey, Dave, this is Scott. So I agree. I think as we spoke in the last couple weeks, both Andy and I met with you at length, and the concern we're seeing and continue to have, and it's no big secret on the city side, and I know our ADOT friends and all of our other regional partners are going to have the same concern, is the continued project infrastructure is built, and we have this focus of infrastructure being built, but yet we're not seeing a correlation to the maintenance dollars and M&O dollars on the backside, and yet we have a pretty high community expectation for maintenance. So we're trying to reconcile how we identify not only new funding sources to complete projects and to support them, but how we look at this infrastructure as the longer term and not be so reliant on HERF dollars only. As that fund continues to be strained, it's continued to never keep up. And once again, we're going to be backlogged with greater inventory. So our concern's a little bigger probably, or longer term, but I still think it's important. And I think one thing we'd like to advocate for is a way to find, whether it's a proportionate share or a rational nexus between a capital improvement project and what it's going to take to maintain it for the long term of the community's expectations. And we don't certainly want to necessarily stall projects or tell you we're not in favor of building them, but it's disappointing when we can't follow the project construction up with appropriate M&O dollars. And that's where we continue to get feedback that some of our service levels are unacceptable. But frankly, we just don't have the resource to continue to add versus adding some FTE and some equipment and some maintenance dollars to the equation to help us start to overcome that.
Thank you, Scott. Jeff, did you have anything you wanted to add to that? Jeff Bauman?
Yeah, I mean, I think Scott hit on a good part of what we had in our discussion. It sounds like we had a similar discussion with you, Dave, that Scott and Andy had. We also, along with all the things that Scott talked about, we kind of talked about the LA consulting study that you had done a few years ago that helped both the city and the county optimize some processes, look for some efficiencies, help us working, the connections between public works and engineering. Just some of those process and flow improvements were where we focused on a little bit more than the funding side, but they work together. Everything Scott said is spot on there.
Okay, thanks. So kind of a similar, before I get to the big reveal here in a little more detail, we're all dealing with resources, both funds and staff. And so looking to balance those things, here was a first cut for a 3-year program. And you can see the, 2020, we're entering the last quarter, or we're into the last quarter, April, May, June. And then you can see 21, 22, and 23. So this is looking at kind of a 3-year program, and, figuring that a lot of these, as Jeff mentioned, are going to be multi-year efforts. So in terms of planning projects, the RTP would be high on the list. West Route 66 would be pretty high, and waiting to launch that until after we get the RTP up and running. The Lone Tree TI, pending analysis, we've talked about looking at traffic counts and traffic projections, and then some model runs of some concepts. And if those bear fruit, pursuing this, that's why it's pending analysis. We're committed to the Regional Strategic Safety Plan. I want to thank John Wenes for reminding me of that. And that's going to be out here in 2023. And then what I have in this lighter gray is maybe it's an alternate schedule for the Lone Tree TI. Part of the reason for that is it's not terribly urgent. And if you look down below, the city's going to be updating its regional plan and focusing on John Wesley Powell as part of that in this time period. Even though it didn't come up, I expect that there's going to be a transit election, which the MPO is typically involved in. And then the 5-year transit plan, even though it didn't rank high on the list, it's certainly going to receive some support from the MPO. And so there's a lot of overlap in this time period at the end of 21, beginning of 22, which might want us to push out some of this. I have comprehensive programming. I have that as in light gray. It's not necessarily, it didn't rank very high, but there does seem to be some urgency. I think as we look at a number of things, so the city council discussed issues about John Wesley Powell and Lone Tree, and which should come first. And a lot of factors came into play in that conversation without a lot of kind of definitive input. I know it was pretty high level conversation, so there wasn't much opportunity. We know we have lots of revenue issues coming to play, which is going to affect program. And then we just heard that, you know, are we considering things like maintenance and operations as we bring that into play? So those are the planning efforts that I would see, and we'll come back. I'm going to hit on the other things very briefly, just to give a little more broad context, and then we can talk through them. So funding pursuit, the PED bike projects was up there pretty high. During the build conversations, we talked about whether we should pursue that. We've decided to go after 4th Street again. This might be the next project in the queue for the next build grant. The advanced transportation maintenance systems, there's a grant out there that's a good fit for that. We can be supportive in helping put that off. The Build America Bureau stuff that Jeff mentioned, hopefully that comes to fruition, and it's really just handed off to the city. If the city, once the city has decided, assuming they decide to participate in that program. And then the CARES 2 that Jeff mentioned, you can be part of that. The support, a lot of that is some ongoing projects, some things that I've already mentioned, and then kind of our more routine things. And this is really where I got down to, you know, we're kind of booked. What could we do for TSMO? And that's, you know, doing some advocating and some tech work, and it could possibly tie back into this comprehensive programming. So this was a first cut. I'm going to shrink this down a little bit. Is that still legible? You can see everything now, but it's kind of small. Is that legible for most people?
Yep. Yeah, it looks okay.
Okay, so you know, at this point, I'll pause again and see if there's what the general reaction is to this. If there's any heartburn for things that are omitted, clarifications. What do you
Mr.
guys
Chair,
think?
this is Ann.
Jeff, I don't see how this, Jeff, or Dave, I don't see how this tab really coincides with the tabs we looked at before with the project rankings.
Well, just to speak to that, you know, regional transportation plan, that's one of the planning projects that we would pursue. PED bike projects, we would pursue funds for those. As you might recall, through the citizens transportation tax, even though there's almost $30 million going to that, that covers basically what's being portrayed as 5 years of need to be addressed over 20 years. And so there's still a whole lot of need out there for funding. The downtown mile, that's addressed under advocacy. Certainly the city has a lot in the works with the Rio de Flag, and you know, we'll just kind of be the horse fly on the rump of the horse there, saying, hey, we need to consider making sure all these things tie together, and just kind of hammering on that. 4th Street Powell, that's part of the regional plan. The city said they're going to try to address that through the regional plan update. The McConnell Connector CMP was put out as in 2023. Regional plan update is part of the support. The active transportation master plan, it's coming into completion, and so we support that as, through advocacy, public participation process. The TISMO I discussed briefly as a general support. BRT will participate. So, I think, let me see where we get down to, there's West Route 66, and there's the programming. So I tried to speak to most of those top, almost 20 projects in some ways, recognizing that we don't have the resource to do all of them. So I hope that.
Going back to Jeff's slide, I thought one of the goals of this outcome was to identify 3 projects for Metro Plan to move forward with, for trying to move those projects forward.
So those 3 projects would be the RTP, that was one, West Route 66, and then the Lone Tree TI. So those would be the ones that we would be working towards moving forward. And then looking at it from a multi-year perspective, the safety plan, and McConnell, and then I put the comprehensive programming in there just because of this recent conversation between at the city council level, and looking to see if there's not a more thorough way to take into multiple policy effects, including maintenance, financial considerations, and other things. So those would be the.
So one of my questions: how did the West Route 66 CMP, Lone Tree TI, all come about when you have a lot more projects on your ranking higher than those 2 projects?
Well, those came about as I looked at, for like the ped bike projects, we're not going to, there's a plan that's almost done. There's some funding in place, but there's a need for more funding. So those fall under funding pursuit. The ATMS, there's, you could almost argue, and that's part of what we're here for, is the discussion, is we could really use a more robust plan for intelligent transportation systems. There is, however, a statewide regional architecture, or excuse me, a statewide ITS architecture. The city has worked on a fiber network plan. The city has the Butler Corridor in place. So there's a number of things that I think we could draw on to put together against successful pursuit of that project. So that's kind of how, some of these, even though they're higher ranked, they get a different treatment in terms of whether they're a plan or whether they're funding pursuit or whether just general support. So the regional plan, again, ranked pretty high. What's our role in that? It's going to be support. We're not going to take the lead on it. We're not going to necessarily pursue funding for it, but we're going to provide technical support, public participation, document review, probably modeling support, things like that.
I still feel like Dave, this is Anne. I'm going back to the agenda item. Are you looking for identifying the additional two Metro Plan project priorities? Or are you asking us to weigh in on your overall planning program? I feel like there's two separate conversations going on.
Well,
So-
yeah, thank you, Ann, and I appreciate that. I'm gonna maybe defer to Jeff Milebeck for a moment, see if he'd like to weigh in and express or provide direction.
Thanks, Dave, and thank you everybody for the comments. Yeah, I guess what I want to say is it's an art, not a science, and the reason we've brought it to you, we're trying to make it a science and attach point values and get the shared priorities and Metro Plan's role all balanced out. And what I hear Dave saying is considering all the other factors of how projects flow, he's proposing these priorities on the spreadsheet that is above. And the spreadsheet you're seeing right now, the 3-year program. And we're looking to get clear on what these priorities will be, and hopefully, adopt it and have support next month if we can. And in terms of your question, could you just ask me again what it is you want me to respond to?
So your presentation identified you were looking for the second and third Metro Plan project priorities. And then we were presented with the spreadsheet of all the agencies' matrix, and there was a prioritization of which RTP was on top, followed by Bike and Ped, followed by Milton and downtown. And so then we jumped to Dave's planning spreadsheet, and it seems to have pieces of that in different places, but I guess I thought you were trying to ask the TAC, what are those second and third project priorities for Metro Plan to work on in some capacity? And maybe that's...
Well, we are, and I hear the feedback from a couple of people at the TAC that the spreadsheets don't necessarily tie out. Dave has made those connections, and I think when the meeting is over, we can go back and work on the spreadsheets and make those connections a little bit clearer. There's a lot of raw material here, and yes, we are looking for the next two priorities for Metro Plan.
Is there any other discussion that TAC members want to have on this topic?
Can you this is Ann, can you clarify what the McConnell Connector CMP is versus McConnell Multimodal Improvements, which I believe that's the project Andrew was presenting earlier?
Thank you, Ann. Yeah, this is Dave. So during the Lone Tree Corridor scoping conversations that Jeff and I had with many of you, and then a conversation that Jeff Bauman shared that he had with Dan O'Coley, looking at McConnell through, looking at the Sinclair Wash and the possibility of extending McConnell out to Lone Tree from its current terminus at San Francisco was part of the conversation. In one context, it was, could this be a transit-only link? Another context was, was it a more complete corridor? And so it really examining the McConnell corridor more completely and the role it can play is really what that would entail. And that really is kind of that long-term need. Is there long-term value to that connection, and can we evaluate that and see it instituted in our regional plans if in fact it has that value.
Thank you.
Okay, so there's no recommendation or requested for recommendation for this topic. It was for discussion only. So I'm asking Dave and Jeff, have you guys gotten the feedback that you want for the effort that you're going in?
Well, I would propose this, Dave, and then of course jump in. I heard a lot of questions about how the spreadsheets tie out. I think perhaps going back and making the case for what we see based on the research Dave has done and the discussion we've had today, and talk to you all some more individually. But at the next meeting, come back and make our recommendation for what we think the priorities are and see if we have your support.
Yeah, I would support that, Jeff. This is Dan. This is all great work. It's a lot of information. So I think Dave sent it out on Monday. We just need a little more time to digest it all. But I will say I think it's great that the bike ped came out as as the top score. I find that really interesting. In terms of, I guess this is, I mean, it's looking at a lot of different things here, but yeah. Tell us again, Dave, what do these colors mean on the table that's up right now? This is on the 3-year tab.
Yeah, and so the colors are really just to highlight kind of the different types of activities. So the grays are planning functions, the greens are funding functions, the blues are kind of a more robust type of support, and the yellows are a more kind of a routine or lower level of support, you know, kind of that advocacy, general technical support, but not quite as involved as we would be, as we are in the Milton CMP, or we are, or would be in the regional plan update.
Yeah. No, I'd like to talk to some of my transportation folks about it. And yeah, I think we should pick this up again next month. And let's hear what else, if there's any other reaction from anyone else today.
Mr. Chair, this is Rick. Just respond to my boss, the CD director. I look forward to our other discussions, but nothing at this time.
Okay. If there's no other discussions on this item, I suggest we move forward. We only have about 11 minutes left of our meeting. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4 items to get through. Jeff, are there any that are top priority for you?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that question. Dave, could you give the screen back to me?
All yours.
I would like to jump to the federal stimulus infrastructure. There's been so much happening with it. Is that all right with you, Mr. Chairman and members of the TAC?
Yeah.
Okay. I put a summary spreadsheet or a staff report together, really just to start to get at how do we get our minds around all the changes that have happened with possibilities for federal funding over the past month or so. And we've got this goal of securing at least 2.1 million in additional resources in the next 5 years. That's in our work plan. And I just summarized some of the government response to COVID-19. So the first act, really, there wasn't anything for transportation or infrastructure. The second act, the Families First, also provided, let's see here, money to states, but not anything directly for transportation. The CARES Act provided a significant amount of funding for transit, 7.2 million here, even locally. And that doesn't even have to, that doesn't require local match, does not have to be included in the tip or the STIP. So the CARES Act was just like, go for it and keep things moving. So there's a phase 4 framework that has developed since I wrote the staff report just a few days ago, but a basically CARES Act 2. And there's some efforts on the part of AASHTO to come up with $50 billion in emergency relief and a 6-year reauthorization for transportation funding. And, you know, it seems possible to me that local projects will become eligible for federal funding. So, for example, the build grant was pursued. I can't remember the exact amount that's been in there in recent years, but it seems like a very easy vehicle for the feds to say, we're going to increase the Build Act and all these projects that have come in competitively, let's approve more of them because they've already been vetted over the past few years. In terms of $2 trillion for infrastructure, I cut and pasted something from Bob Holmes with Nexus Consulting, who is really provides service to the city of Flagstaff and Mountain Line. And what he basically suggested, if we have suggestions for job creation or shovel-ready projects, whatever they are, get them to him, and so that he can start pushing for these projects with the congressional delegation. And at this point, I think we're looking at CARES Act 2 to pass in mid-May. And I am hopeful, in fact, that there may be some funding that comes through that really is formula award. It doesn't have to be competitive, kind of like the transit funding that came through. However, I think it's also likely, and really this is just a guess, that there will be both competitive as well as formula distribution. So I am one person, and I know we've just got a few minutes left. There's a lot of smart and experienced people around the table. That's my quick overview, and I would appreciate if other people could jump in on what they know or what they suspect might happen and how we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Mr. Chair, this is Kate Morley.
Go ahead, Kate.
Yeah, I really appreciate Jeff putting this on the agenda. We've been tracking it pretty closely, anticipating the large infrastructure package to be coming down the road. And, you know, as we've looked at 80-something projects already today, see the importance of moving that. They're getting our portion of that stimulus package to move those projects forward, but also really, I think, as an obligation to this community, which, you know, the Brookings Institute rates as one of the top 10 impacted communities in the country due to the economic impacts. And so I see an obligation for us as partners to figure out how to move some of these projects forward quickly and not get, you know, in our own way of receiving some of this funds. I agree with what Jeff said. I think they're going to pump a lot of money into existing programs like Build. We've also seen a proposal that puts a lot of money into the CIG program, which is the program that funds BRTs. And so, you know, I would like to propose that we all really prioritize some conversations in the next couple of weeks and prepare to put together some packages and you know, make some agreements and concessions with each other about what it is we can come to resolution on to move projects forward under the CARES 2.
Thank you, Kate. Anybody else have any discussion items for this item?
This is Anne, and go ahead. Somebody else speaking.
Go ahead, Anne.
Related to the project prioritization list, to segue off what Kate was saying, I mean, we do have some projects rising to the top that have studies in various stages, some costings and some elements of known scope that really could be creatively done, packaged together. So, I mean, we've already done a lot of really good work on a lot of planning portions of different projects. So it is a really good opportunity to get creative and think outside the box. And also related to what Scott Overton said earlier about perhaps there are some O&M maintenance type projects that the city could also be thinking about as part of that package.
And this is Scott. Just so you do know, we are establishing our deferred maintenance list and prioritizing additional overlay work that may be eligible. So I know in the last round of stimulus in 08-09, both the county and city did that. And we think we've got a number of roadway sections that are prime for that work to go to work quickly, and we can actually probably implement even this summer. So hopefully we'll have that opportunity, and we'd appreciate at least having a shot to be on the list, as we'd like to prioritize some of that work as well.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this is Jeff. And I think what I hear Kate suggesting is that we come up with a resolution even, but we get clear as a region on what our funding priorities are. Is that what you're suggesting, Kate?
Yeah, that, and I think it's going to take, I think because this is coming so fast that we need to probably have separate meetings outside of standing TAC meetings to prepare.
Yeah, there seems to me there's a balance of, each agency can absolutely pursue whatever it is they want to pursue. But to the extent we can all go in with one voice for the competitive funds in particular, maybe it'll help increase what comes here. So I think Dave and I can start to get that information from folks through email and phone calls after this meeting.
Thank you. Jeff?
Yes.
I see John West made a comment here in response to earlier HSIP funding question. I checked with traffic safety section today, and they're saying they still wanted to go out for a call for projects this fall, but finance us that we hold off if there was going to be a new transportation bill or if continuing resolution was anticipated. John, I think Rick's main question was on projects that were already awarded, were there going to be any impacts? Mainly the city's concern is the 4th Street Cedar project, correct, Rick?
I'm sorry, Nate. Just repeat the last part of your question.
Last part of my question was a statement to John saying, I think the biggest concern that the city had was on projects that were already awarded, was there going to be, or is there any known impact to HSIP funding for already awarded projects? Your main concern is the 4th Street Cedar roundabout project.
Yeah, that is what I was concerned about. Just as we're trying to figure out how to manage our resources, our available project managers and whatnot, it would sure be good to know if there's any potential that the schedule or funding might be pushed out.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is John. We've got a TIP amendment in right now, Rick, for the 4th Street Lockett roundabout project to put some additional design money into 2020. That's in the electronic STIP, the e-STIP, and I'm working on that with Dave Wessel and Brett Anderson. We'll certainly make sure we ask the question about your concern about the funding, but that would be the first I've heard of it, if there's going to be any kind of impact to that 4th Street Lockett roundabout project. I haven't heard that that's an issue, so I'll follow up with you on that.
Thank you, John. All right, is there any further discussion on federal stimulus infrastructure?
Mr. Chair, real quick, this is Nick Hall. I need to leave for another meeting, so thank you all. I'm out here.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you, Nick. With that, I'm going to ask Jeff if there's any items from Executive Director, item H, and then we'll move to kind of the closing business.
1 second here. I know we're over time. And, I don't. I mean, the draft board business agenda, I'm going to give a budget update, and it is similar to what I presented before, adopting our budget. There really are no significant changes. So I don't think we need to spend more time on this, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Future agenda items, I suggest that we include the PTP priorities from this agenda, item E. I suggest we include item G, the Lone Tree traffic interchange discussion, since we didn't get to this meeting.
Okay.
And then continuation of item D, Metro Plan project criteria process. And hopefully we can get to a point where we're able to recommend 2 additional projects move forward.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Is there any further discussion on future agenda items? Okay, then let's move to item 4, closing business. Items from the board. Does the board have anything? How about FMPO staff? Do you guys have anything?
I'm good. Thank you all for being
All
here.
right, then let's adjourn this meeting at 3:33 today. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah,
Thank you all.
thank you. Take care.
Okay.